Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today I'm here to do the next tag or the sister tag in the counsel and guide tags from Natalia at Ouroboros. And today's tag is the 7 guides. So these are the 7 oracle decks that act as guides in your practice. So I had a really tough time actually choosing my 7 oracle decks. And I was chatting with Renee from Meadowlark Mystic. We actually chatted about this for a couple of days because we were both struggling. And it kind of finally occurred to me that the reason that I was struggling so much with this one, whereas the tarot was quite a bit easier, was that I don't use my oracle decks as standalone decks most of the time. Meaning that most of the time when I pull an oracle, it is to reinforce, expand upon, or sort of wrap up my tarot reading. So most of the time my oracle decks get used in conjunction with my tarot. They're not the primary focus of the reading. They're more a supplemental or an add-on to the reading. So trying to find 7 decks that I could talk about on their own merits was actually a little bit challenging for me. So I did manage to actually come up with 7 oracle decks. And once I kind of started pulling decks, it started kind of clicking a little bit easier for me. The first one that I want to talk about is my Mother Mary Oracle. And this is a deck that I only use at bedtime. So I definitely use this as a standalone deck. And it's a deck that helps me to kind of connect with that universal unconditional love. So kind of what we think of Mother Mary as embodying. And for me, this isn't so much, it is kind of like a prayer in a sense, that the way that I work with this deck is that I pull a card, I look at the images, and I think about the titles at the bottom and what that means to me and how that was reflected in my day. I do have to say I'm not a fan of the guidebook, but that's just me. I do love the artwork and I love the images, and I pull a card and I sit with the message and I let it be, I try to let it be the last thing that I see before I go to bed at night. These images are just wonderful images to have in your head before you go to bed. So that's kind of how I work with that one. And she is definitely sort of my guide for connecting to that universal love. So the next deck in my collection that I've chosen is the Mother's Wisdom Oracle. Now, whereas Mother Mary is more of a universal and kind of cosmic spiritual guidance, this is sort of like that down-to-earth, everyday guidance of motherhood. I wasn't sure what to make of this deck when I first got it. I really like the artwork. Some of the keywords don't really resonate with me, and I have a tendency to just kind of pay attention to the artwork that I'm seeing. But for me, this is very much a healing, a self-love, a remember to care for yourself just as much as you care for others. That is what this deck reminds me to do, because sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves because we're so busy taking care of everyone else. And this deck for me really it's kind of like a healing self-love deck where it reminds me to mother myself just as much as I mother everybody else. So that is the Mother's Wisdom Oracle. The next deck that I have to talk about is the Angels and Ancestors deck. And this is a deck that I actually do use quite often as a standalone because it kind of has its own system. It has ancestors, it has angels, and it has sort of these more Lenormand type cards in terms of seasons and animals and that sort of thing. And one of the ways that I like to use this deck, separate from my tarot, is to actually pull one card from each of the different categories in this deck. So I'll pull one ancestor, one angel, and one supplemental card and create a reading out of that. So a lot of times I do that, and this for me is very much a deck about connecting to ancestral energy. There are angels in this deck, but I don't really see them as angels. They're called guardians. There's one right there. They're called guardians in this deck, and I kind of see them more as the sort of earth elemental guardians that are a part of our ancestry as well, because we do come from the earth. We are of the earth. We go back to the earth when we pass on. And to me, that's how I connect with those energies. So that is the Angels and Ancestors Oracle. The next deck is actually, well, it's kind of cheating. I'm cheating a little bit because it's actually 2 decks in one, but I do read with it as if it's one oracle. So this is the Blue Messiah reading cards, which have the blue bottoms. I have trimmed this deck, so it did have borders around the sides and top as well. But the Blue Messiah has the blue bottoms with the back that looks like I think this is the image from the Sound Healing card. And then we have the Cosmic reading cards, which have the darker background on both sides, or the darker background and the darker bottoms. So for me, this deck is really about connecting to that cosmic self, that idea that whereas, yes, we are of the earth, we are born of the earth, we die to the earth, but we come from the stars. This is a great deck to pull that reminds me that we are all connected, and I'm connected to everything just as everything is connected to me. And it kind of helps me to get back on track. It's also a lovely deck for more kind of spiritual readings, for spiritual guidance. Just a beautiful deck, and I love the sort of cosmic connected messages that this deck brings. So these 4 decks are kind of decks that I do have a tendency to use on their own to connect with, that cosmic or universal love, to connect with that sort of earthy, everyday nurturing and mothering that we all need, to connect with the ancestors, to connect with the larger universe and cosmos. And then these 3 decks are kind of the decks that I use for more everyday things. So these are like the little everyday guides for me. So the first will probably be no surprise to anybody who's watched my channel. It's the Roots and Wings Oracle. And for me, this is just, it's one of my favorite decks. I love the artwork. This deck is just, it is simple, powerful messages. I don't need to work at it with this deck. It just comes very naturally, very intuitively for me. And it's a really easy reader that just kind of works well with everything. But it just adds a lovely kind of wrapping it all up. That's what this deck is really good for. Wrapping it all up, and here's your final message. Here's what the takeaway is. And for me, that's what this deck works really well for. And it's just one of my favorite oracles. It's kind of like a workhorse oracle. It'll do anything I throw at it. So that is the Roots and Wings Oracle. The next deck that is my kind of everyday messages is the Oracle of the Mystical Moments. And this is a deck that, while I do use it for everyday sort of messages, it's the deck that kind of tells me, step out of your norm, step out of your comfort zone, and look at what else might be going on. Pay attention to the details. That's what this deck is for me. It's a deck of details. It tells me to look at the little things, the things that I might be overlooking, the things that I'm just not taking notice of. And it's a deck that kind of asks me to leave my expectations at the door and to kind of embrace this magical and, wonderful and weirdness of everyday life. Now, the keywords on this deck are really not my favorite, and I don't resonate with most of them. And to be perfectly honest, if I hadn't spent so much time edging this deck with this complete antique edging process that I did on it, I probably would have chopped the titles off by now. But I kind of just ignore them. This creator has a tarot deck coming out, hopefully sometime next year, and I am really looking forward to that one. That one I think is going to be wonderful. But this is one of my favorite little oracles because it's so different. It asks me to look at things in a different light. It's kind of like the Hanged Man in a deck. Things aren't always as they appear, and it really wants you to pay attention to those little details. And I think that that's really important because in life, a lot of times we overlook the details. So this is the deck that reminds me to do that. So that is the Oracle of the Mystical Moments. And the last deck that I have to show you is a relatively new deck in my collection, and it's a little bitty oracle, and I totally adore it. This is the Inner Compass Oracle, and it's a collage oracle. And this deck just, again, it's kind of weird and funky, a little bit like the Oracle of the Mystical Moments, where it asks you to pay attention to the details, because there is a lot of detail in this deck, and there's a lot of little things to pick up on. But overall, this for me is just a super easy reader. This deck is kind of like the Roots and Wings. You can just throw it at anything and it'll give you a great message. I love the artwork. I love the simple keywords. And for the most part, the keywords really do resonate with me. This deck for me is kind of like the Roots and Wings and the Oracle, the Mystical Moments kind of combined into one. It's kind of weird and funky, and it's got some different things going on, but it also feels very earthy and very grounded. For me, this is a deck that is really about in the moment. It's not about long-term planning, long-term healing, long-term growth. It's just about what's going on right here, right now. And I just absolutely love it. It's such a wonderful little deck, and it's just full of fantastic artwork, great messages, and I love the keywords, which is not something I can always say about Oracle. So that was a look at my 7 Oracle guides. I would love to know which Oracle decks you would pick, so feel free to do a VR or just leave it in the comments below so we can chat about it. I want to thank you again to Natalia for putting together this tag for the community. I've really enjoyed seeing everybody's videos across all the different platforms, and I encourage you to go ahead and check those out because they are awesome. So thank you so much for joining me for this 7 guides tarot tag. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.